Hello and welcome to episode 100 of the Magic Sock. I'm your host Ron, and I've been doing the Magic Sock for over 2 years now. And the Magic Sock, we discuss everything that's magic. I've been doing this podcast, as I've said, for over 2 years, and this is the special 100th episode. We have a very special treat this particular episode. We are going to listen to an interview that I recorded in talking with Mark Purvis and Mark Rosewater. Both work for Wizards of the Coast on the Magic the Gathering brands. We have a lot of good, fun, exciting stuff to listen to in this episode, as well as we got some songs that we're going to play, and we also have a great amount of feedback, so I can't wait to get into that. So let's just jump right into the show and get things going with a blast. But here we go. We're going to listen to, it's about 33 minutes, a interview with Mark Purvis, Assistant Brand Manager of Magic, and Head Magic Designer Mark Rosewater. So sit back, listen, and have some fun. Okay, here we go. First off, if we could go around, just if each of you can introduce yourself, Mark and Mark. I know Mark Rosewater, I know you, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear the other Mark, your last name.
This is Mark Purvis. I'm the Associate Brand Manager for Magic.
Okay. And for those of our listeners out there, everyone knows Mark Rosewater, your Head Magic Designer. I want to thank both of you for taking the time to partake in this interview. And what I'm hoping you could help us with here with my listeners is if you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts of Morningtide in regard to how it fits into the Lauren block, specifically focusing on why did you focus on classes. I'm very interested to hear the generation and where this all came from.
I'm interested to tell you. Pretty much what happened was during Mirrodin, we had made this decision. The creative team really liked the idea of moving to a race class system for creature types. So before Mirrodin, just usually one creature type would appear in creatures. It would be whatever. It might say goblin, it might say soldier. It really could be anything it wanted to be. Usually when it was a class, it just implied that it was human, is how it tended to work out. So it never said human on the card. Just if it was human, it would tell you what the human did. So it would be a wizard or a soldier or a cleric. And one of the things that the creative team was very interested in, and I was definitely on their side for this, trying to fight for this, was that I felt that if you look at almost any game right now that uses fantasy, the race class model is, pretty much used all over the place. And that the idea of defining sort of what you are and what you do, we felt was both very interesting from a creative flavor standpoint, and I, as one of the designer guys, I felt it opened up a lot of design space. And so one of the reasons I really pushed for it, beyond the flavor, which I thought was important, was I felt like there's a lot of interesting things we could do with it. That having two different designations on most cards definitely allowed for more interplay between them, allowed for more flavorful cards mechanically. And so in Mirrodin, we decided to move toward race class. So the interesting thing about it was Mirrodin was the set after Onslaught, which was the tribal set. Right. And it turns out that sort of the tribal set the wheels in motion, but we didn't get it done until the set after. So I was a little bit sad that with all this sort of interesting race class stuff to work with, except it was the set after we were playing with tribal and playing with creature types. But I knew deep in my gut that one day tribal would be back because Onslaught had gone very well. It was definitely one of the themes we knew players really liked. And the plan was when we came back to do tribal, I'd always planned to really look into race class because whenever we re-examine a theme, we wanted to do something different with it than the last time we had done it. So Onslaught was good, but when we did tribal again, we didn't want to just do Onslaught 2. And so the obvious choice was, let's experiment with race class.
That makes sense.
You can jump in if you have any more questions. I'm just going to keep talking, I guess.
Sure.
This is a long story, but if you have some questions, feel free to jump in.
Because we haven't played with these cards yet, my understanding of the interaction with, let's say, a changeling card is that if you play a changeling card, and I know a lot of my listeners are wondering this, once they open these packs of Morningtide, once they go on sale, what they're wondering is if you play with a changeling card, and let's say you have something that interacts with, let's say, rogues or elves or wizards, would the changeling also count for all of those? It would count for the tribe as well as also the class itself. So if one
Correct.
card says you do one, you would get both because you got a changeling in play. Is that
Well,
correct?
so here's how it works. Although we differentiate race and class from a flavor perspective, mechanically they're all creature types.
Okay.
The game doesn't differentiate goblin from soldier. And so if a changeling is all creature types, it's all creature types. Races are creature types, classes are creature types, they're all creature types.
Okay.
So the tricky thing is when a card talks about both, for example, we have a cycle called the Banneret at common.
Yes.
And the way they work is they say, all Kithkin and soldier spells you play cost one less. So because they're worded together, when it says Kithkin or, that means that it doesn't matter if it's both. You only get to cost one less.
That makes sense.
If we'd written them out as two separate sentences, all Kithkin costs one less, all soldiers cost one less, then a Kithkin soldier would have cost two less.
That makes sense.
But we didn't do it that way. In fact, in design we did do it that way, and development thought they were too strong. And so in development they changed them so it just said, Kithkin or soldier, which means if you're either a Kithkin or a soldier, you get one, but you get no more than one for being more both.
Okay. Moving on to the next question, and I'll give this question to the other Mark on the line, and then Mark Rosewater, if you want to then answer it. Mark, if you could tell me, what is your favorite mechanic in Morningtide and why?
For me as a player, because I'm not involved in R&D, I kind of get to pretend like I'm still on the outside to some extent and get really excited when I see new mechanics. And for me, it's got to be Prowl. I was really impressed with the Fairy Clan in the first in Lorwyn, and Prowl really enhances the fairies, I think, quite a bit since it is a rogue mechanic, and most of the fairies are rogues.
And so for at least for Morningtide, I can't remember. I read this on the Magic the Gathering site earlier this week. For Morningtide, all Prowl cards directly deals with Rogue, but possibly in the future you might open that up into different classes. Is that correct?
We designed the mechanics such that we have the ability to later come back to it and not have it be on Rogues.
Okay.
So the mechanic's not inherently tied to Rogues, but in Morningtide it only appears on Rogues.
Okay. And was there a decision in research and development to basically resurrect ninjutsu and kind of change it a bit into Prowl? Or I'm trying to understand, it seems very similar to ninjutsu, and I was wondering what the thought was there in creating Prowl.
Well, I made ninjutsu. The idea of ninjutsu, the flavor of ninjutsu was it's sneaky. Like, you think it's this, but it's not. It's really this other thing.
Right.
And so ninjutsu is really about sort of sneaking things in that you didn't know about. The idea behind Prowl is trying to benefit damaging people with rogues. The idea that if my rogue gets in and hits you, there's extra things that can happen because of that.
Right.
And so, they are both related to combat, and obviously both of them sort of deal with some surprise element, I guess. But the flavor of Prowl is much more like when my rogue hits you, extra bad things can happen. Where ninjutsu is more like, this sneaky ninja isn't what he appears to be.
Right. Okay. And Mark Rosewater, and what is your favorite mechanic? I believe you did write about this in one of your articles, but I don't know if all my listeners did.
I think my favorite mechanic is kinship.
Okay.
What I like a lot about kinship, and this is maybe the designer in me, is that it does a really good job of caring about both race and class, but in a way that's very natural, that doesn't seem odd that there's two different things it cares about. And that one of the things when we were making the set that we were worried about is we really liked, so the first lower one's all about race. And so along comes Morningtide, and we want you to care about class, but we also want you to still care about race. We didn't want you to care about these 8 tribes, and then on the second set go, whatever, stop caring about tribes. So we made this conscious decision to make sure at Common especially that very few cards only care about class. There are cards that care about class in Common, but they don't only care about class, mostly. So that, if you want to care about Kithkin rather than soldiers, the Kithkin or soldier banneret works for you. But if you are planning ahead and trying to really build a soldier-themed deck, well, then you can care about soldiers.
I think one of my personal formats is playing in Highlander format, and I'm really curious to see how I'm going to be able to build like a tribal / class Highlander deck of building like an all elves and then throwing in, assassin or whatever else I can kind of throw together. So I think having kinship, in Morningtide is really going to add another, dimension to your deck building abilities and to the different tools that deck builders are going to have at their disposal. So I think that's going to be fun.
Another cool thing about kinship is if you build a card around a particular kinship card, it means your deck isn't tied to a single creature type, it's tied to 2 creature types. So for example, I showed off a card called Leapfront Elder,
right,
which played Shaman and Tree Folk for free if you revealed them. And like that, if you're building a deck around that card, you don't need to have either Tree Folk or Shaman. You just have, like, every card has to be one of them. And so it allows you to build, say, sort of a Tree Folk Shaman deck.
I'm looking at the card now on the site, and that's going to be fun to be able to have all these like options with kinship. People are going to have to start thinking when they're building, especially depending on what environment. If they're doing sealed or drafting or whatever, it really opens up other options for them to really start thinking in different levels. Moving on to the next question, I'll go back to the other Mark. Could you tell us what is your favorite card in Morningtide and why?
That would be tough. I have to think about that for a second.
Okay. Mark
Probably Stonehewer Giant.
And could you tell us, because a lot of people, when they listen to the podcast, one of the complaints that I get is people always say, well, I'm on the train and somebody reads a card out and talk about a card and I have no idea what it does. Could you please tell us what
He's a 4/4 for 2 white and 3 mana. He's a giant warrior with vigilance, and his ability is pay 1 white and 1 tap, search your library for an equipment card and put it into play, attach it to a creature you control, then shuffle your library. And one of the things that I think is really cool about Morningtide is that there is an innovation of adding tribal to equipment in this set. There's warrior equipment, rogue equipment, and one of the things that's not immediately obvious about Stonehewer Giant is since he has vigilance, you can attack with him, wait and see how your opponent blocks, and dial up whatever piece of equipment most suits combat based on how it looks like the combat's going to go.
That's a sneaky move. I like that. If I pull that card in the pre-release, I'm going to remember that one. I hadn't thought about that. That's really good. Yeah, because I hadn't remembered that he had vigilance. That's really nice. Thank you. I'll write that one down.
We like sneaky mode stuff in the set so people can find them.
Well, just to go off on a tangent for a second, one of the things that, with doing my podcast and when Lorwyn first came out, I was raving about Lorwyn. I really like Lorwyn. I like Lorwyn a lot better than I liked Ravnica. I don't know, I guess flavor-wise. I really like the artwork, the feel, and such of Lorwyn. And listeners were writing in and saying, and especially a lot of veteran listeners, they were saying, we're sick of tribal, we're not really into this. And then I started explaining, if once you really start understanding the nuances of the set, really seeing how things start fitting together with Changeling and the interactions with different cards, if you have one of the Harbingers that you could basically go for, was it Nameless Inversion because it's a Changeling shapeshifter card as an instant, things that weren't easily noticeable, let's say when you first open the pack of cards, but when you start playing with it, it really reveals itself, in a totally different way where you have this great wealth of options that are available. And that's been one of my, great discoveries in playing with the set, since it first came out. And I've been trying to convince, my listeners of, hey, really look at the Lorwyn cards. So it's nice to have you guys on the phone here being able to interview to be able to say that, hey, you guys, you did a great job on Lorwyn. I love it personally. I think it's a great set, and I love just seeing what those nuances are. And I'm very curious to see, once I start opening the Morningtide packs, I know that those cards are going to really work well with Lorwyn, and how it's all going to come together as a block.
Yeah, one of the things that, I think you're hitting upon a point that I talk a lot about in my column, which is design technology keeps improving. That we try things, we learn from them, and then we take that knowledge and we apply it. Each year we have all the knowledge from years before. And I think a lot of people look at Tribal and they kind of think like, well, Onslaught is how Tribal is done.
Right.
And I feel like, no, that's kind of how we did it the first time we did Tribal. We'd never really done it before as a major theme. We tried some things out. I think some things worked well. I think some things didn't work as well. And I feel like each time we come back to a theme that you've seen before, we apply sort of all the new technology to it. And Changeling is a perfect example of, like, we didn't come up with Changeling tech back then. We had misforms. Changeling is, to me, higher tech than misforms.
Yeah, I would agree with
both
that.
in that it's cleaner, it's simpler, and that we were able to spread it through all the colors, not just blue. And so I feel like a lot of times the reason I think people sort of judge something ahead of time is they judge it off what they know, and when you're revisiting a theme, it's the last time you did that theme. And I think if you look at the difference between Ravnica and Invasion, or the difference between Lorwyn and Onslaught is, we really sort of do things a little differently than we used to. There's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more of synergy and interweaving things. Because Tribal, for example, is a very what we call linear theme, meaning certain cards really beget you playing certain other cards. We tried really hard in the design to add a lot more modularity to it, so that it's part of what Changeling was doing, of making more ability for things to crisscross. And like the reason I like Kinship is Kinship cards let you build decks that intertwine one race and one class together, and that's a very different animal. Onslaught didn't do that at all.
Right.
And I think a lot of people seeing new sets is sort of understanding that when we're going to approach something that we've done before, we're very eager to sort of learn what modern technology can do with an old theme.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, and that you could really see how I've been playing Magic for over 14 years now, and just in seeing the advancement, how the sets are coming out and the different innovations that are there. It's not the same old stuff. There's a lot of creativity that's still being added to the sets that are coming out. And if it weren't, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be spending the money buying, the cards, because I'd say, oh, yeah, it's the same as what I've had before. But there is still that joy of when you rip open the pack. You still have that little giddy feeling for when you first open your, for me, Unlimited back 14 years ago, where you're like, oh, this is all new. It's all exciting. It's all different. How can I play with these with what I already have? So it's like Christmas morning, you're opening up these gifts and you don't know what you're going to get. So it's a great, it's great innovation on what you guys are doing in the recent sets of, like you said, taking what you've learned from the past and building off of that. Moving on for a little bit for the next question, I'm very curious that the Lorwyn block is an experiment in that it's a two-set block. We're going to have Lorwyn and Morningtide, and then when Shadowmoor comes out, it's going to be a whole other block. I was wondering if both of you could talk a little bit about the thought process and the decision to basically come up with changing what players and what Wizards themselves have been used to for the last so many years, and having three sets create a block. So what was going on behind the scenes for that?
I should probably defer to Mark, since the decision was made before my arrival. But I think, I'll let you answer that.
Okay, I will answer this one. I actually, this was my idea, so
okay,
I will answer what was going on. One of the things that we've definitely been playing around with in the last couple of years is having a fourth set, be it Unhinged, be it Cold Snap, be it a bit 9th and 10th edition, and that one of the things I said to the people here is I said I believe that there's some other things we could do if we're interested in doing a fourth set, and that I would like to be able to plan a whole year and sort of plan it rather than. Up till now, it's always sort of been an extra thing. It's like, well, we'll do our normal thing, and then here's an extra thing at the end. And I said, well, I'd be very interested, because I'm very into sort of meta design, block planning, and sort of looking at the whole year as one entity. I said, well, give me 4 sets. I want to see what I can do with a whole year where I'm planning it. It's not just sort of, and we have something at the end, but we're planning it all together. And they said, okay, well, go do what you can do. And I came back and I said, well, here's what I want to do. I don't want to make one set with 4 sets. I want to make 2 blocks with 2 sets. And they said, well, why do you want to do that? And one of the things that I think is really important about Magic is that I think most games, when you play them, you reach a plateau where it kind of gets monotonous. in the sense that, if you play chess, there's a point where to get good at chess, you have to memorize opening moves.
Right.
The point of Scrabble, we get good at Scrabble, you got to memorize 2-letter words and 3-letter words. And that the way Magic kind of avoids getting to that state is we just constantly change the game. We're constantly sort of pulling the rug out from under our players and saying, oh, you think you figured it out? We'll figure it out again. And part of doing that is doing things we've never done before, breaking, taboos that we've never done, and that I felt like Magic's always had 3 set blocks. What if we didn't? What if one year we just didn't do that? And that a lot of my job is saying, what if we didn't do blah? And I like to examine things we always do and say, well, what if we didn't do that? And like I said, some meet with better reactions. I mean, Planar Chaos was, what if we messed with the color pie? Some people thought that was amazing. Some people really, really didn't like it. So,
right.
But I do believe that essentially my role as head designer is shake up the status quo, keep it interesting, and do different things. And I felt like doing two set blocks was something interesting that we could do something really neat with.
Yeah, I think that's a good point in that, having played games for, God, decades now, you do get to that point where, if a game becomes stagnant, you're going to say, well, you know what, I'm kind of tired of this. I'm going to move on to something else. And I know that there was a lot of rumbling, if you listen to a lot of what players were saying on different forums on various sites that, Wizards of the Coast is just releasing too many sets. There's too many sets. We can't keep up. Too much is going on. So I think it was a wise move to, like you said, shake something up. Just try something different and kind of see. One, I would imagine that that's going to, obviously change all your production schedules on the inside so that you can react differently and plan better. By you're not worrying about the next set's going to have to come out and it's going to be tied into Lorwyn. You could just say, clean slate, start with something different. So I could see how that could be creatively a nice break and different path for your team, to start focusing and just have their energies go into a different area. So I'm very curious to see how this experiment works. If you hear from players that they hate this, is it basically written in stone that moving forward for 2009, 2010, there's going to be a block as just the main set and then one other set, or are you?
Oh no, nothing's in stone. I mean,
Okay.
We are trying something. I mean, what people don't realize is we're insanely receptive to what the audience wants. If we do something and the audience goes, we don't like that, we tend not to do it again. If we do something and the audience says, wow, that was really fun, we put it in our pocket to come back and do it again. This is an experiment. This is not set in stone. This is not something that's, already given. We're trying something different for this year, and we want to see what people think. Be aware also that while the next block is a completely new block, has completely new mechanics and new theme, there is some larger planning going on. These aren't just 2 random blocks that happen to be next to each other. We planned both blocks to be side by side. And so the way I like to talk about it is I've been trying to get greater inter-block synergy so that the blocks that are back-to-back just have more interplay between them. This is like the most synergistic thing we could do because we planned them together. Although I should stress, you're not seeing tribal. It's not, you're not going to see any of the. There's no champion. There's no changeling. I mean, none of the stuff that you're seeing in Lorwyn. It's different, but I can't say anything until the actually comes out.
Sure.
But
sure.
it is. We are. And when you do this interview or later on, when Shadowball comes out, there's something different going on, and we clearly have something in mind. And in fact, there's decisions we've made, in Lorwyn and Morningtide that you'll go, when you see what's upcoming.
And that's
I'm
what
excited. Like I said, I'm really, really proud of Lorwyn and Morningtide, and I'm giddy as a schoolboy about what's coming up. So.
Well, that's what I like hearing, and I detected a little bit of that in one of your articles recently, where you were basically saying to your audience, "Hey, you just wait until Shadowmoor comes out. I just can't wait until you guys see that," because that helps us understand, as the audience, as players of the game, that you do have, there is this plan, this overreaching plan. There's a reason behind why things are changing. There's a greater, I guess, a subtle line that's tying everything and pulling everything all together. So that's the sense that I got, but it's nice to hear you say that, get confirmation on that, so people can understand that. I guess it's hard. Maybe some players might just they buy the game and that's it, and they play the game that
they don't really focus more about what's really going on behind the scenes. How much time and planning and design work and testing and such that it takes to go through to build all of these sets, and how many cycles in advance you guys are already, what you're working on today is, things we're not going to see for God knows years from now. And that is always interesting to kind of peer behind, the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, to be able to hear a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes. So I do appreciate you taking time to explain a little bit in that. The next question that I have is from a listener, and what I did was, when I knew that we'd worked out the details of the interview, I basically contacted several of my listeners who send me feedback on a regular basis, and I basically sent out to people and said, whomever can get back to me first, I'm going to take this question, I'm going to ask it, to Mark, and then I'll ask it to the other Mark too, and see what your thought is. So my listener writes, and he says, with the pushing of tribes and classes in Lorwyn and Morningtide, which emphasizes creature interaction, how does Wizards see the future of mass destruction cards such as Damnation, Oblivion Stone, Wrath of God, etc.? Does Wizards want to keep mass destruction cards around to help deal with aggro decks, cut back on them to encourage more creature interaction, or keep things as they are now with having some of both? So I guess he's wondering, what are your thoughts, in moving forward with how the sets are created in regard to you're focusing on tribal, you're focusing on a lot of creature interaction. However, you've got these mass, removal spells such as Damnation and Wrath of God. Were there any decisions that came across of how the set or the block was going to interact with, board sweepers?
So the way I like to talk about Magic, metaphorically, is we talk about Magic design and development being a pendulum, like sort of a pendulum swinging over the sand pendulum. And that part of our job is to keep pushing the pendulum in different directions so that the game, focuses on different things at different times. And so I think what happens is whenever we focus on something, we sort of make sure that the natural enemies of that thing exist but aren't as strong as they could be. So, for example, in a tribal year, we want to make sure that we have a lot of answers to mass removal, because tribal wouldn't be fun if the environment, had too much mass removal and not enough answers, because then you couldn't play tribal. And so you'll notice that we definitely put a lot of things in the environment that helps the tribes deal with the existence of mass removal. And in the block itself, we didn't put a lot of strong mass removal.
Right.
That doesn't mean we don't like mass removal. It doesn't mean you won't see a good mass removal again. It just means that right now we're focusing on tribes, and if you want people to play with tribes, don't give people cards that make it hard to play with tribes. And so we're definitely, mass removal sort of goes down a notch while we're trying to make tribes work. But we'll move on to something else, and mass removal definitely will have its day again. It's just not right now.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I'm going to ask the next question to the other Mark, and then I'll switch back over to you, Mark Rosewater. My question is, what Magic format do you like to play the most when you have time to play? Do you like playing Standard or Extended or Sealed or Draft? What do you like to play?
That's easy. I play almost exclusively Limited. I like playing Winston Draft. I like doing Sealed. I'm having a lot of fun playing with Lorwyn, and we just got Morningtide into the office a little while ago, so I've been doing a little bit of that, and it's really exciting.
That sounds fun. That sounds good. And Mark Rosewater, when you have a chance to play, what do you like to play?
Funny, because my out of work time is I have a family of three, so I do not play as much Magic out of the office as I used to. In fact, the time I enjoy most is my dad plays, and when he comes up to visit me, we'll actually play Sealed a lot. We'll gank out some cards and just play. I agree with Mark that I play more Limited than Constructed outside the office just for time reasons. But I don't know. I mean, for me, the most fun I have playing Magic is a format that very few people get to play, which is what I call the design format, where you play and then you change the cards and you play again, and then you change the cards and play again. And a lot of the stuff I really enjoy, which is, most people don't experience Magic this way. To most people, the cards are the cards, but I have a lot of fun out sort of playing with something and figuring out what it is I like and keeping that part of it, and then changing the things I don't like into making something I do like. And so it's a different experience, I guess, for most people who play Magic. But I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and people ask me, like, don't you ever get sick of Magic? And I'm like, no, because I feel like we keep getting to do different things and change it around. And so, like, I'm working on the 2009 fall set right now, and like I'm having a blast. We're just like that's just doing stuff that haven't done before, and there's all sorts of neat things happening. And you know, I had a few moments like I've never had happen before, and they happened to me. I'm like, this is awesome. I've never had this happen to me before. And so like I say, a lot of my Magic is concentrated in doing what I love, which is making new cards.
Okay. And my last question on a similar note, and Mark, when you said you have 3 kids, I have 2 kids, and my wife has been gracious enough to take both kids and get them bathed and such. So she asked me very nicely, she's like, how long will the interview take? And I said, well, I'm going to try to make it between 30 and 40 minutes. So I've got a 6-month-old and a 4.5-year-old. So I have to quickly switch hats and turn into daddy mode in a little bit. So Mark, I know
my kids, their 4th birthdays today. My twins' 4th birthday today, and I'm leaving here downstairs to their birthday party. They're going to take care.
Happy birthday to both of them. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day with them. I'll make this last question really quick, just to kind of help listeners understand your personalities outside in the Magic world, and I'll send this off to the other Mark first. When you're not in the Magic world and playing Magic, what is your favorite game outside of Magic? Or if you don't like games, what do you like to do in your downtime outside of playing Magic?
I don't think anyone who works here doesn't like games. Magic's definitely my number one game, and unfortunately or fortunately, I too have 2 little boys. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So my ability to play games, my time to play games is pretty limited. And when I do have time, it's almost always Magic.
Okay.
I know that may sound corny, but it's the truth.
Well, I trust me, I understand where you're coming from. And Mark Rosewater?
It's funny. Probably the game I play most outside of Magic these days is Uno with my 7-year-old. But here's the game I play most. It's not counting games with my children. There's a game I actually made like 10 years ago. My wife and I have lunch every Tuesday, and we play every Tuesday, which is a game called Mood Swings, which doesn't even exist. It's a game that only my wife and I play for our own enjoyment. But it's a trading card game I made a long time ago that's just a lot simpler. And my wife is she likes games, but she won't play Magic with me anymore. And it's something that I made that she likes because it's a lot simpler, and it has some of the pluses of trading card games, but it's much simpler than Magic.
Okay, that's
not to say that Magic can't be simple.
It's a funny thing because with my wife, she'll kindly work with me and play some games, and I got the Jessica was kind enough to send me the Elves versus Goblins deck, and so my wife sat down and we played a couple games, and she gets frustrated because I have 14 years of experience of playing. Yeah, and I'll say something like, well, okay, look, at the end of turn, you might want to do this and might want to do that. And so we're very competitive, the both of us. So it gets into this, like, if she beats me, I'm like, oh, we got to play another game. And she's like, no, I'm done with Magic. So it's just kind of funny just to hear how, spouses kind of, get into issues over Magic. So it's pretty funny. But it's always good to hear what other, I know all of us with having a family and such, it's just not enough hours in the day to play some of the games that we might want to outside of of our world of Magic, but it is nice to hear different points of view and where you guys are coming from. I want to thank you both for taking the time to be interviewed on the Magic Sock podcast. And Mark Rosewater, again, in the past we had talked on the phone for the Beckett Magic the Gathering magazine article, and I you were very gracious in all your answers for my the article that I put together for that. And both of you, I do again thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to getting this all post-produced, all worked up, chopped up, put it all together, and it will be up not this Sunday because it's coming up, but the Sunday after that. So again, thank you both for your time.
You're welcome.
And Jessica, thank you for helping to pull this all together. I sincerely appreciate it.
Okay, we are back. Hope you enjoyed that interview. I want to thank again Mark Purvis and Mark Rosewater for agreeing to participate in the interview. I sincerely appreciate their time, and also I wish to thank Jessica from the PR firm that works with Wizards of the Coast for setting this all up. I do appreciate your help. Without you, I wouldn't be able to pull this off. So if you have any comments, feedback in regard to the interview, please feel free to send that to themagicsock@gmail.com. I'd like to hear what you think about the interview. As well as you can call the voicemail line at 1-201-467-4962. Please keep in mind that you can also email me your MP3 feedback. I gladly would play that on the show. Those of you who know how to do some recording, all you need is a cheap USB microphone and a free bit of software like Audacity or the trial version of Cast Blaster, and you're good to go. Or even something like GarageBand. Just throw something together and email me an MP3. It could be longer than 2 minutes if you'd like, because there's really no time constraints. Just make sure the file is under 10 megs, which it should be, and I'll listen to the feedback. If it's useful, I'll play it on the show. So moving on to the next portion of the show, I have a promo for you. It is a Patio book, free Patio book, available on patiobooks.com. So it's by Mur Lafferty, Playing for Keeps. So let's listen to it and check it out.
Heroes. The very word conjures images of women and men in noble costumes, paragons of virtue, harnessing powers beyond comprehension to fight for justice and defend good against the plots and ravages of evil. Keepsy Branson once dreamed of being a hero, but she and the other members of the so-called third wave of superpowered humans have been judged to have abilities too weak and useless to be formally trained as heroes by the Academy. But as a villainous plot threatens to tear Seventh City apart, what Keepsy and her friends learn is that in a world in which so-called heroes are manufactured by greed and driven more by agenda than principle, true heroism isn't about the strength of your powers or the shine of your costume. True heroes are those who make difficult choices for good with the powers that they have, whatever those may be. Playing for Keeps is the new novel by Mur Lafferty, available for free via podcast in both audio and PDF formats, and now available for purchase in print. For more information, please visit playingforkeepsnovel.com.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of promo there. And for those of you who are new to podcasting, listening to podcasts, I should say, be aware that there are a ton, and I mean a ton, of free and cool, exciting audiobooks out there. So all you need to do is visit patiobooks.com, and there's a ton of science fiction and fantasy that you can listen to your heart's content. As well as, if you're interested in other podcasts, you can either find them out through iTunes, go to the podcast section. You can find a ton of podcasts on anything from cooking to knitting to magic to reading books to films. You name it, there's a podcast about it. I think there's over 10,000 podcasts that are out there. As well as, please be sure to visit www.mtgcast.com, where you can find other cool Magic the Gathering podcasts. So let's jump right into the next portion of the show, which is feedback. So let's check that out. Okay, we've got some feedback from Mike, and he writes in and says, everyone seems to be calling Indomitable Ancients a junk rare, but it seems pretty darn useful to me. So bear with me a second here. I gotta pull that up. Indomitable Ancients. Oh yeah, actually, Saw this guy. I like this guy. 2 colorless and 2 white. Creature, Tree Folk Warrior. It's a rare. He's a 2/10. Ouch. So, Mike writes, Indomitable Ancients. Says it's pretty darn useful to me. It's a strong defender, a potentially powerful attacker with Doran out, which you have to say that you agree with that. That would make him, he'd attack for 10. Not too shabby there. And can be an awesome source for life gain when combined with Condemn. When it comes to goblins, the most handy cards in Morningtide seem to be Stench Skipper, an elemental but clearly designed to go with goblins for its ability to give goblins 1, the ability to block flying guys, and 2, more importantly, the ability to send 6 damage in the air at a player. So, let's look Stench Skipper up. Bear with me here. Stench Skipper, where are you? Here we go. Stench Skipper. Rare, 3 colorless, 1 black, creature elemental flying. At end of turn, if you control no goblins, sacrifice Stench Skipper, 6/5 flyer. Not too shabby for 4. So I mean, you know, at end of turn, if you control no goblins, sacrifice them. But man, you got a goblin out, and you got a nice 6/5 flyer for 4 mana. That's nothing too shabby there. So yeah, I would agree. I think that's a pretty nice card, especially in limited, like in sealed. That would be great. A 6/5 flyer. Play turn 1 like a 1/1 goblin. Keep that out. Make sure he doesn't attack. Just hang back and just keep attacking with your 6/5 flyer. Not too bad at all. Earwig Squad for its versatility in tournaments against a wide variety of decks. Taking out 3 key combo cards can likely work wonders. I'd love to rob a mannequin deck of makeshift mannequin. So Earwig Squad. Let's look at that one. Earwig Squad. Okay, here we go. It is of course it's not popping up. Creature, Goblin Rogue, 3 colorless. Come on, pop up. There we go. 3 colorless, 2 black. Creature, Goblin Rogue. It's a rare, has Prowl, 2 colorless and a black. When Earwig Squad comes into play, if its Prowl cost was played, search target opponent's library for 3 cards and remove them from the game. Then that player shuffles his or her library. So Mike goes on to write, he likes that, and he goes, of course, no one will know for sure until everyone gets a chance to really play with these cards. This is Mike in Ann Arbor, and I think it makes some good points. There's some good cards that are in the set. I think it's going to take a little bit of while to kind of dig through the, through the cards just to see what's available. And again, by the time this comes out, Morningtide will not have been released yet. Only those of us who got a chance to play in the pre-release will have a chance to play with the cards. So let's move on to Will. He has feedback, and he sent in, congratulations on number 100. My pre-release summary ended up being kind of long, so don't feel like you have to read it on the show, since I'm sure you'll have enough content already with it being the 3-digit milestone. So I'm going to read a little edited version here. These are all my thoughts about the Morningtide pre-release that I think you'd find interesting based on what you've talked about on past shows, the pre-release experience, how Lauren plays, and limited playing against little kids. Because I was sorry to hear that your Morningtide pre-release experience was such a short one. Your experience was pretty different than mine. My friend and I showed up at about an hour after the doors opened for the pre-release and got into Flight 4, which started within 10 minutes after we showed up. Just enough time for me to get my bearings and look around for people I know. Then there was deck construction, which lasted 30 minutes, but I would count that as magic time rather than dead waiting time because I spent all of it trying to build something from a pool I found rather difficult. Then I played my 4 rounds of Magic and left after waiting for the friend that I had traveled with to get his prize for the flight. Altogether, we were at the site for probably about 5 hours. I never felt like I was sitting around not doing anything. Maybe it's just me, but there are so many card interactions in Lorwyn that games can last a long time if neither player gets a bad draw. During one of the times when I was waiting between rounds, a guy gave me a tour of his misprints binder, which was filled with all kinds of cool stuff, like 2 pictures printed on them or cards cut horizontally instead of vertically, so you could see 2 cards with the white space between them. It was all pretty neat. Now, I want to say, again, Will, thank you so much for the congrats on episode 100. And again, it's very interesting because in my pre-release, they give you 15 minutes to build the deck. And I did spend a good amount of those 50 minutes. I think I spent like 35 minutes or so building my deck. And then for the rest of the time, I always go to the men's room. That way I kind of wash hands and go to the bathroom, put some water on my face, kind of, get myself ready for the, for the rounds ahead. Usually the rooms are pretty stuffy. There's a lot of people in the rooms, and usually you're kind of crunched. I'm a tall guy, so usually the tables are pretty close together, so you're kind of all squinched together with the people next to you and behind you. So it's usually not necessarily the greatest of environments for playing in. But today, this last pre-release wasn't as bad. It's been worse. But when I decided to leave, even after the first round, I went outside and I couldn't believe there's still a long line for people waiting to get in. So I would not be surprised if at the end of the day they cleared close to 500 people or more through the Philadelphia pre-release at the convention center. I mean, I know they start, they're there at 7-ish in the morning or earlier, opening the doors, and then they let us in at 8, and then they start giving packs out for the first round around 9. We started a little after that because our pod was late in getting started, and then I wouldn't be surprised if they were there, until after 7 or 8 o'clock or even later at night. I've never stayed that late. I'm usually gone by early afternoon. I just can't afford to be around for 12 hours, just not with what I got on my plate these days with the other responsibilities I have. But it sounds like you had a very good experience. When I was younger, I did go, and I believe I talked about this at one of the early episodes. My wife-to-be and I went down to Maryland for a pre-release. I believe it was Exodus. And it was one of those events that was before they did the pods and the flights and all that kind of stuff. And it was just basically a mass, 700 and something people in this big auditorium. And they were with a bullhorn. Okay, everybody from round 1 who won, go on this side. And it was just mass chaos. And, we stayed there for a good many hours, and it was just not that great of an experience. It was just crazy. So, in retrospect, it was nice when I was younger to have all that extra time, and, you could sit and play for hours on end. But now that I'm, a little bit older, and, I got 2 kids, and I got a lot going on, I just can't spend a 12-hour day, just playing Magic. Especially, most of the time when you're playing, at least when I'm playing, the rounds go pretty quick. There's only been a few times when I've been at a pre-release in the last couple of years where my 3 games actually go pretty much the full 50 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever it is for the round. Typically, I'm done within 20 to 30 minutes. Usually, matches are pretty quick. Even with Lorwyn, they're a little bit longer because if you don't have creature removal and your opponent doesn't have creature removal, you kind of get into a stalemate. But still, even with Lorwyn, I was done pretty quickly. Now, AJ sends in the last bit of feedback, and he says, fortunately, I was able to go to the Morningtide pre-release in Nashville, Tennessee. Rather than join a flight, which functions in a similar manner as the one you discussed, I joined what was called the main event for the pre-release, which required at least double the amount of players for a single flight. It functions in the same manner as a single digit, except there are 7 rounds rather than 4 and has significantly better prizes. The top 16 players, who were originally not going to receive a prize of any kind, received 18 packs of Morningtide. Those who made the top 8 received a full box of the new set, and finally the top player received 2 boxes of the new set. The only other way to get that amount of prizes would have been to participate in 2 flights, which were 5 rounds, rather than the 4 you mentioned, and get first in both rounds. The top 8 in 2 flights would have received better prizes than the top 8 in the main event, but the 3 extra flights would have been even more brutal than the near 10-hour event as it stood. In the main event, I placed 12th with a shot at being in the top 8 had I accepted to draw my final opponent offered. Rather than take the easy box of prizes, I valued playing and unfortunately lost the final round as my second loss in the event. I played 2 different decks throughout the tournament as a change-up when the initial build wasn't performing as well as I would have hoped. I was surprised, but the host of the event, Next Level Games, allowed editing and changing decks with no restrictions between or even during rounds. Now, let me just stop with that. I'm not sure what you mean by that, allowed editing and changing decks with no restrictions between or even during rounds, but I'll say that at the Philadelphia pre-release, You open your cards, so you get, well, at the Morningtide pre-release, we received one tournament pack, which was the 60 card pack, and then we got 3 booster packs of Morningtide. You rip open those cards. We do not have to give them back. We do not have to list them. Basically, all we needed to do was basically build a 40 card deck. Anything else on the side that we didn't use was considered our sideboard. So if in game 1, round 1, game 1, I played, and in game 2 I wanted to sideboard other cards in, I could. Same with game 3. Round 2, I didn't have to unsideboard everything and go back to my quote-unquote original deck. I could do whatever I wanted. Philadelphia has been doing that for years now because I think the mechanics of keeping track of all the decks and having everybody write the decks down was just becoming too cumbersome for the amount of people that were there. So they gave up on that years ago. So it's the same kind of format at Philadelphia. You could basically do whatever you want. My only problem is that if you go on day 2, it's so easy for someone to cheat because all you have to do is get your cards, build your deck. You could walk out into the hall or go to the men's room and just basically take cards that you got from yesterday's event and just work all these good rares into your deck or commons that you needed to build a nice solid deck. Go back to the event and you could just play. Now, I've said this many times in my past podcasts. I've had guesses and hunches that people had cheated on day 2 when I would go on a Sunday, and that's really forced me to try to go on a Saturday because some of the cards that people were playing, they'd have like 3 of a certain common that was, red burn damage, which is just the chances of that are pretty crazy, or having a red rare that matches all the red commons. Just some of the stuff just seemed a little too crazy. However, when you go on a Saturday, I found that chance of running into those kind of decks is much smaller. Like, in fact, I don't recall a time where I've gone on a Saturday and have had that. And you got to keep in mind that the enforcement at these pre-releases is extremely low. So, there really is no incentive to stop someone from cheating. If someone wanted to cheat, they just could, and there's really no way that they could really be found out unless someone physically sees them doing it. So that's one thing I don't like about the pre-releases now. But again, because of how many people are there, you kind of have to go on the honor system. And I'm not saying that most of the people cheat. I could just say that most of the players that I've played with, I've had great fun because they're new to Magic. And a bunch of people at a pre-release are typically new. They've never been in a tournament before and never had DCI cards. So it's very interesting to see how that works. But getting back to AJ, he writes on and says, originally I was playing a 3-color build, a blue, black, and white deck with a slight base and rogues. The goal was quite specifically to have an early opening with the few Kifkin I managed to get a hold of, and then draw into the rogues with a flying wing condition in my rare blue card, which I'll discuss in a moment. Kithkin Greatheart combined with several changelings and the ruined stalactite was able to receive his giant bonus with quite a bit of consistency. As the second turn drop on several games, this card was a major deterrent for most players if they had a few beaters within the first strike range, which stalled for some easy flying hits in the early game. I was hoping to abuse the 2 Kithkin Zephyrnauts' kinship ability using a handful of Kithkin and a large supply of changeling, but this simply never happened. I had several problems before finally losing in round 4 to a faster white build. I had failed to pull much in the way of removal, which one of the reasons I played white in the build at all. Oblivion Ring and Neck Snap were helpful in several of the matches, but after the 4th round I decided to shift into a different build with more focus on the black and blue I mentioned earlier. Okay, and he goes on, let's see, I'm trying to see. Goes on and says, all in all, Morningtide seems like a great limited set, but I have my misgivings for Constructed. Murmuring Bosk will boost the already competitive Doran builds even further, and Mutavault is likely to become the manland of choice for any build that can afford the colorless mana. Personally, I was looking for Kinsbale Border Guard. Kithkin have largely been written off in the competitive standard atmosphere against the likes of Tamagorf and Doran, but I see a new build emerging with the Border Guard and Malicious Pride, providing a direct counter to every mass elimination around, which has been their biggest drawback. Rustic Kalakon finally gives a combat trick that doesn't remove a slot from the creatures of the build or the mana base, as well as boosting the tokens generated by the Border Guard. I suppose we'll have to wait and see how the builds are influenced by the new set. I'm just hoping this one gets a little time in the spotlight. So again, AJ, thanks so much for your feedback there, and I sincerely do appreciate that. And I would mention that I would agree with you that, I just wanted to say, because I know some of you are going to wonder, his blue, he mentioned a rare blue card that he pulled. It was, what is it? The Vidillion Click. And he also pulled a Profane Command. Wow, that's nice. And a Vidillion Click. So let me, hang on a second. Let me see if I can find that for you guys. Pull this up real quick. It's searching. Don't you love it when the internet goes really slow? I might have to ban this. I might have to bag this because it's not coming up. Anyway, here, I'll try one other thing for you guys. Hey, it's the 100th episode, and I'm reading 2 cards out, and I know some of you guys are saying, what the heck does that do? I don't know. Well, let me see if I can hook you up. Profane Command is the Lorwyn rare card. X, 2 black, choose 2, it's a sorcery. Target player loses X life, or return target creature card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to play, or target creature gets -X until end of turn, or up to X target creatures gain fear until end of turn. So, not too shabby there. And the other card I'm looking for, and I can't find it, and it doesn't ring a bell with me. So I'm going to try one last thing, and I might have to give up on it. Let's see here. There we go. Vidillion Click. I had spelled it wrong, that's why I couldn't find it. 1 colorless, 2 blue, legendary creature, fairy wizard. Rare, flash, flying. When Vidillion Click comes into play, look at target player's hand. Where is it? Look at target player's hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, that player reveals the chosen card, puts it on the bottom of his or her library, then draws a card. It is a 3/1. So, very nice rare. Not too shabby at all. So, again, AJ, thank you so much for the feedback. I sincerely do appreciate it. And that's going to about wrap it up for this week's episode. We're going to end with a little bit of a plea here. If you've been listening to the Magic Sock for a while now, we've had 100 episodes. I could use help, as I've said this in the past, with the website domain fees and the web hosting fees, as well as the recoup of the equipment I've purchased and software I've purchased over the last several months. I've bought some new gear and new software. If you're interested in making a donation, please visit www.themagicsock.com. There's a donate button right on the left-hand side of the home page. So again, I want to thank you so much for all your time, effort, and support in getting us to the 100th episode. I hope you do enjoy the interview that I had this week. I think it was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping there will be other such fun, exciting episodes yet to come. So I'm going to end with a song that I've played before on the podcast, but it always reminds me of my early days of learning about podcasts and also of podcasting. This is Brother Love's Summertime. Now, I know it's dead of winter here in North America, but got to have something to look forward to and to hope for. So we're going to play Summertime by Brother Love, available on podshow.com. That's music.podshow.com. And in closing, the Magic Sock. I'll start again. Closing. Magic the Gathering is trademarked and owned by Wizards of the Coast Incorporated, a subsidiary of Hasbro Incorporated. The Magic Sock is not affiliated with Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro in any way. To send feedback, send an email to themagicsock@gmail.com. Audio feedback is welcome. Call the voicemail line at 1-201-467-4962. But please keep the message to under 2 minutes and be sure to mention your name and city, state, and country. Again, this week's song, Summertime, it rocks, by Brother Love. I love this song. And if you're new to listening to the Magic Sock, welcome aboard. If you've been listening for a long time, or even just a short time, thank you so much for sticking with me. I do appreciate it. Again, thanks so much for listening, and as always, keep playing Magic.
When I was young, I'm talking about the good times. Just you and me was all we ever cared about. We had it all, we had it all. Oh, I'm talking about the good times. Drinking all day, drinking all night, dancing by the firelight. Come on, because you are hot as hell. You know that you are beautiful heaven. You know that you are summertime. Yeah, all I'm talking about the simple times. Hey, it's